There's a saying that in academics, progress is measured in gravestones, right? The academy is notoriously conservative and slow to adapt and evolve, and there are natural reasons for this. People who have spent their entire career, entire identity, creating an academic construct that then is proven to be false. They're unwilling, let's say, to engage with the reality of the world, and it's only after they die that the next generation can come in and say, yeah, well, actually the world works this way instead. Right. And it would have been great if we could have done that 25 years ago, but here we are now, and that's fine for most cases. But again, the kind of unique moment that we're in historically, not only from the technology perspective, which like clearly we are in an era of radical acceleration in capabilities, right? But from the perspective of just like literally raw demographics, right? This is an unparalleled moment in human history. We have never in human history had so many people over the age of 50, let alone people over the age of 70 living on this planet, right? And as we know, like the just natural consequence of politics is that older people tend to be more engaged, they have more resources, they vote more. And so at the moment, my sort of assessment as a systems engineer of American politics is that we have become captured. At this stage of the game, like you have a lot of senior and retired people who are living better than any generation of people their age in human history, who are, continuing to, enjoy the benefits of a system that has been constructed for their interests for the last 30 or 40 years at the expense of the younger generations who are going to be tasked with living on this planet for the next 40 to 50 years, right? And you would think from first principles that we ought to be designing policy and the objectives that we're striving for as a society in the interest of those who are young and vigorous and will be, the active participants in that society moving forward for the next few decades. But on issue after issue after issue, we see that the millennials and people, I'm just going to broadly say people under the age of about 40, like this society does not work for us kind of at all, right? Like if you're under the age of 40 and you can afford a house and healthcare and you have a stable job and you have like a line of sight to any kind of retirement savings, you're kind of like I don't know if I would say that like the 1%, but like you're certainly in like the top 5 to 10% of everyone your age demographic and down. Right. And that's kind of, well, it is profoundly sad, but it's kind of scary to think that we've gotten that extreme in society where, we're kind of eating the young, right? It's like, I often think of like the, Saturn eating his son piece of art. If you're familiar with that, like that's kind of how it feels if you're under the age of 40 in the United States today. And, so I think that, the other thing that I'll say there is that like the contrast or the, sort of discrepancy between that enforced reality that most of us who are younger are experiencing today versus the sort of objective assessment that there are really no limits anymore to what we could accomplish as a human society, right? I mean, we literally live in an era where, and I'm going to paint with a broad brush here. Clearly there are problems. Clearly we haven't solved everything, but like we can literally send rockets into space and land them on a floating barge in the middle of the ocean and radically collapse the cost of having a fully spaceborne economy. We're probably talking about at least going to the moon and having a colony, if not Mars, becoming, multiplanetary. We've surmounted almost all of the biological challenges that had existed. I mean, clearly we need to like extend lifespans, if we're going to be capable of doing that. But like, you don't die from like trivial diseases in childhood anymore for the most part. And, if you have a catastrophic healthcare situation that happens to befall you that would have certainly taken you out of the game in any other era of human history, you can miraculously survive and thrive on the far side of that today. So like, it's not that we can't build housing in America. Like, we know how to build houses, right? Like this, it literally is not rocket science. And by the way, we're doing the rocket science really well at this point, but like all of these compounding problems, right? They're all choices. They're willful choices that we have made about what we are willing to tolerate in our society. And I think that that is just, we're reaching the breaking point of where that system, like as you said, I believe that we are deep in the fourth turning, right? Like I think 10 years from now, we're going to look back and it probably will be marked to the start of the Trump administration, the first Trump administration. And, I hope that we're able to navigate this crisis successfully. But, it is very clear that the system that we are operating in is no longer fit for purpose, and it is no longer achieving what it ought to or needs to achieve on behalf of the people for whom it is ostensibly operating. And so I think that, again, whether it's on Bitcoin policy, or whether it's on AI policy, or I mean, I can pull another one out of how I used to work at Uber. I used to work on the self-driving unit at Uber. And like, we've had the capability to have self-driving trucks on the road for 10 years, like literally 10 years. We could have done this in 2017 if we had wanted to, but there's just complete gridlock around the idea that we would do that because of the impact that it might have on the labor economy, right? Because truck driving is it's the number one job around the United States. Most people don't know that. It's like the number one job in like 32 of the 50 states or something last time I checked. There's literally millions of people who have these jobs. And this isn't to minimize the impact that it would have to those people if we did automate most of those jobs with, self-driving trucks. But, again, you can't sort of like hold back the tide of history indefinitely, for the sake of, short-term interests. We need to like accept that new technologies come along, integrate them, incorporate them, make thoughtful and intelligent policy that allows us to multiply the output that we can achieve as society based on that, and then harvest the deflationary gains that should come from that improvement in the quality of life and recycle it into finding newer and better and more wealth generating activities, right? And there needs to be some social safety net and how you get from here to there. But like all the things that I just described, right, for the last 10 years, we've seen almost no progress on. And it's because of the conservative bias of aged people who hold the levers of policy in our country. At least that would be my contention. And again, unlike any other time in human history, you have never seen a society that was operated by, of, and for people above the age of 65. It just hasn't existed because we've never been faced with this scenario. And so this is literally, in pretty much every way, a historic moment for humanity and an unparalleled moment of both opportunity and risk for the human species. Because it, in the past, may have been the case that we could muddle our way through and like, the course of history was moving slow enough that like muddling for 20 or 30 years had no meaningful consequence. If we muddle through the next decade, it is very unclear what will remain of what we currently think of as modern society around the world, whether it's, on climate change or becoming multiplanetary or resource depletion, AI, Bitcoin, like free money, surveillance, like all of these sorts of things. Like we're just in the meta crisis now. And I think we really need to both acknowledge that in order to start really addressing it and solving it. And then what we really need is a generation of young, vibrant, visionary leaders to step up and help chart the course from where we are to where we need to be. I think that's the moment that we're in. And I really think that, the time is now. If not us, who? If not now, when?